Alaska can be pretty wild. If you have lived here for any amount of time, you've probably seen some natural disaster unfold one way or the other, which I realize is not particularly uncommon if you live really anywhere on Earth, but the natural disasters in Alaska can be particularly spectacular. And today we're going to be unpacking some of those big natural disasters that we see. Before we get started, though, my name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska. My mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And before we get started, again, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and make sure that you do comment down below, because we do feature one of those comments in every single video to make sure that we're responding to your comments and making sure those are highlighted for the benefit of the order. Now, without further ado, let's go and jump into today's video. All right, I'm going to be giving you these natural disasters, really no particular order. These are all pretty wild occurrences, and if you get the opportunity to witness some of these without necessarily having to participate, it'd be great, because absolutely awe-inspiring. You really get a sense for what nature is capable up here in Alaska. But anyway, the first one we're going to list here is going to be the Good Friday earthquake of 1964. This one's really unique because this is kind of an event that really impacted the entire state. Just about every town in Alaska has some memory about the 64 earthquake and how it impacted them. It was the second largest earthquake on recorded history, and about 131 people actually did die in this earthquake. And there's some great documentaries out there talking about the fallout of the earthquake. It's just incredible force of nature, seeing just how it really shaped a lot of the modern Alaska landscape that we do see up here. And really most of the destruction and a lot of the deaths that we saw actually came not so much from the earthquake, but from the tsunamis that resulted from it, because we had a lot of underwater avalanches. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but a lot of underwater activity that really did create a lot of the tsunamis that did go and wipe out a lot of towns, such as Chinega, which town of Chinega, just about all of the structures were completely leveled except for the schoolhouse that was over 100 feet above the water line. Another town that was really impacted by the earthquake in 1964, especially is the town of Seward, because Seward was actually very on pace to become a big hub for industry and business in Alaska because of its location right next to the ocean. They had a bunch of canning and shipping and everything that was happening right there, in the entire industry along the shoreline was completely destroyed and went up in flames as soon as the tsunami came through and just wiped it out. Speaking of tsunamis, the largest one that we saw was about 219 feet that went down near Valdez, if I recall correctly. I think it was Cold Bay. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was Cold Bay, where it was about a 219-foot high tsunami that went through there. And yeah, you need to go look at video footage of tsunamis and those tidal waves really to get a full appreciation for the damage that can be done by waves of this size. So that's really kind of a legacy we're continuing to see up here in Alaska, is just the earthquake from 1964. And yeah, if you get a chance to come up here, you definitely need to go check out Earthquake Park in Anchorage, and that'll start to give you kind of a good perspective and context for how impactful this earthquake was in the history of the state. The second event I really want to highlight is the Fairbanks flood of 1967. Now, this one wasn't nearly as deadly as the 64 earthquake, but still involved water, and I believe there were actually 8 deaths and about 12,000 people had to be evacuated. And what happened was you had a particularly wet summer going into 67, which, tough break that 67 earthquake was so close on the heels of the 64 earthquake, but there was just so much precipitation already happening throughout the summer, and the river right next to Fairbanks just rose and rose and rose to the point where 95% of all of Fairbanks was underwater. And I heard somewhere the average was underwater by about 5 feet, and then it took about 5 days for that water to recede so people could actually start rebuilding. Something that was really impactful for the people in the area, though, was that this happened in August in Fairbanks, which means you've only got a couple of months then to get all the repairs done that you're going to need to have completed on your buildings in order to be ready for winter, because the winters in Fairbanks, they're harsh and they come early. And that really was part of the big concern of the flooding that happened in 67, is just because that did happen so much later in the year, so much closer to the winter time frame. But yes, very devastating, tons of damage. And you can still go down there and just really get a sense for just how extensive the damage done to Fairbanks was during this flood. All right, number 3 is actually the Taylor Fire Complex that happened in 2004. Now, this is a little bit more remote. So as far as I can see, there weren't any deaths recorded as a result of this, but it did have some pretty big impacts for people immediately living in the area, because it really was a series of 7 forest fires started by either man-made or lightning, and it burned actually about 1.3 million acres worth of land over in the Tok area. So not a whole lot of people living over there, but it did have big impacts on the area, because with all the fire that was going through there, for those of you who aren't aware, the smoke actually becomes very acidic and just really deteriorates the entire air quality for the entire area. Just to give you an idea for how impactful this fire was on the air quality in places as far afield as Fairbanks, is just looking at the registries we see and what we saw with the air quality data, because for about 15 days around Fairbanks, around the Taylor Fire complexes, fire, as we see that there was about 1,000 milligrams per cubic meter for the particulate matter, which means, like I said before, where you get all that smoke in the air and all the acidity and all that stuff. So there was 1,000 milligrams per cubic meter. Now, usually in that area, like a hazardous amount of particulate matter in the air is about 250 milligrams per cubic meter. It's unhealthy when it gets to 65 milligrams per cubic meter, and the normal amount in Fairbanks is about 10 milligrams per cubic meter for the particulate matter. So you can see that the air quality in Fairbanks and kind of the interior of Alaska really got impacted for a while. I think it was like 15 days, but I kind of suspect it probably took a little bit longer for that for the levels to finally go back down to where they should be. And really, the driving factor that really contributed to this fire was that it was a really dry summer. And then you had it was dry to the point where in Alaska, usually the May, you're still going to have the breakup season. June is going to be pretty dry. And then July, it starts, warms up. Then at the tail end of it starts cooling down. And in August, it does actually start turning into the rainy season. Well, the problem was for that summer, it's pretty much had 3 Junes just back to back to back. So it was really dry, and you can see it's pretty easy in that environment that we would have fires getting started by either man-made mistakes or by lightning. And that's fortunately what happened in 2004. All right, we're going to go and finish up this video in just a minute. But before we do, though, I'm going to go and answer one of the questions I saw in the comment section. And that is Alaska a good place for a conservative to move to? Alaska, like any other state, we're going to have areas that are going to lean more towards one political affiliation than the other. So the best advice I can give you is really go look at the recent elections into what area it is that you're considering moving to, and then go and really do some research into the political candidates that were elected and see what issues are important to them and see what their stances are. And if you can vibe with the tribe, with whatever the majority agreed with, there's a good chance that's going to be a good fit for you. Now, also, I do have a podcast for those who are considering moving to Alaska called the Alaskan Journey Podcast, where I interview people who have recently moved up here to Alaska. So if that's something that would benefit you, do make sure you go check that out in the description section down below. Now let's go and finish up today's video. All right, now the 5th natural disaster I'm going to put on here is actually going to be one where, as far as I can tell, there actually were no fatalities for the people in the immediate area, and that is the Thompson Pass blizzard back in 1952. So this Thompson Pass is over near Valdez, and it is known for being one of, if not the snowiest areas in the entire state. And the winter of 1952, 1953, it really outdid itself. Just to give you an idea, for the entire winter, it snowed about 974 inches. And in just one day, it actually snowed 62 inches in one day. So that's, as you can imagine, that is a ton of snow, and luckily not a whole lot of people trying to get in and out of that pass during that time of year. So there really weren't no casualties or anything like that, but it just gives you an idea for just some of what the state is capable of as far as the snowfall goes if you get into the right situation, the right circumstances. Also, if you're a snow machiner, and that's something you're really into, then, you're in luck because, Thompson Pass pretty much has snow in it year round. So if you're feeling the itch around July to get out, that's going to be a good place for you. One of my good friends was actually talking about needing to go up there just because it's a good place for him to still go and still go snow machining, even though it's summertime. So if you suffer from needing to be out snow machining more frequently than the rest of us, then there you go. Thompson Pass is for you. All right, the fifth big disaster that we see is it's a doozy. So this is the eruption of the Norod Volcano in 1912. So for those of you who are not aware of where that is, which I was not prior to researching this video, that is actually just northwest of Kodiak Island. And this was such an enormous eruption. It was actually the largest eruption of anything really in the 20th century. And the fact that it's really not witnessed by a whole lot of people kind of seems like a little bit of a disservice to the absolute incredible, amazing, awe-inspiring spectacle it must have been. But very few people were there to see it. I'm sure that some passing ships got quite a show. And the residents of Kodiak, I'm sure, also got to see a little bit of it as well. But for the most part, not a whole lot of people were actually there. Because of the remoteness of the Norod volcano, scientists were not able to get out there until about 1918. And when they did get out there, though, they found out that the volcano had erupted about 15 cubic kilometers over the course of 60 hours. And matter of fact, that is so much. It is actually 30 times the amount of matter that we saw that got erupted in the Mount St. Helens volcano, and I believe it was the 80s if I recall correctly. So that just gives you an idea just for the awe-inspiring volume and size of this volcano that we're talking about. So if you get an opportunity ever to fly over this area and just kind of see exactly what this looks like, I'm sure that's going to be time very well spent. All right, last but not least is going to be the glacial lake outburst really in the summer of 2023. Now, as far as I can tell, there's no deaths or casualties from this, but it has caused significant damage to the property owners who have homes next to Mendenhall River. So what this is, what a glacial lake outburst is, when a glacier is melting and moving down the side of a mountain, occasionally you'll find like a big pocket of ice that just gets kind of captured in almost this pocket like that's off the side of the mountain, okay? So either just with the natural geological outlook or whatever, however it's designed, there's a big bowl that's kind of cut into the side of the mountain, and the ice that's stuck there melts over time, and it forms this lake that is kind of just hanging there in a giant bowl on the side of the mountain. And what happens is when for whatever reason, there's a burst, like there's a gap is created and the water just all rushes down all at the same time. And you can imagine the impact that this has. Well, when this happened just around our capital city, Juneau, Mendenhall Glacier, this actually happened. We had a glacial lake that had kind of formed on the side of a mountain, and we don't know exactly what happened. It's not uncommon that water eventually is going to find some kind of a weakness, and the water seeps through there until eventually, like a dam, it just bursts all at the same time. And that water just went rushing down the side of a mountain and drained directly into the Mendenhall River. Usually not even going to be a problem. This happens all the time. I think there's like over 1,000 or so instances that you can find in the wild. It's just they're so remote, nobody ever hears about it. But in this instance, the water rushed down into the Mendenhall River, and a lot of people in Juneau actually do have homes and buildings built alongside the river. And suddenly you can imagine that river just shot up like over the course of like a couple of hours. And it was pretty destructive. Like, you need to go see the pictures and really get a sense for just how destructive that this can be if you have a property that's right there next to the river. And I mean, within like a couple hours, it was already 3 feet over the previous record. So as far as I can tell, no deaths were recorded. Obviously, a lot of damage done to the properties that were right there on the river. But yeah, I guess if you're out in the wild and you see those glacial lakes that are kind of just out there hanging out in like a big bowl on the side of a mountain, really appreciate the beauty and everything. But I guess just be aware if something did happen and that gap opened up or something like that, that is going to be an entire lake's worth of water suddenly rushing downhill, and it's something you should be cognizant of. So this has been your video talking about the 6 most awe-inspiring disasters that have occurred in Alaska. I got to the ones that really stood out to me. Do you have any that really stand out to you? If so, make sure you post those in the comments section down below for the benefit of the order. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.